On tonight's Cover One Buffalo podcast, we talk all things Aaron Kromer with everyone's favorite O-line expert from trench warfare, O-line masterminds, even established the run now, Brandon Thorn. But first, our guys, Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia Worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron,
yo,
how you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. My wife's out of town for work here for the last
solo dad duty
week. Yeah, so it's been solo dad duty, which has been fine. We just got out of school yesterday. I showed you we had about a dozen or so of their friends over here for water guns and water balloons. Yeah, so yesterday was fun, but today we're packing, we're trying to get stuff done. First day of summer, kids are a huge pain in the butt. So if you guys see me take my headphones off and go, it's because my kids aren't asleep yet, and it's highly combustible up there when they're unmanned and unwatched. So hopefully they're just dozing off to sleep. I tried to wear them out, but you never know. 6 and 9 year olds, so it's a rough bunch up there.
You're going to learn today.
Whew.
So without further ado, we will jump right into it. Tonight, one of our favorite shows we have on, our go-to for all things offensive line. You know him from his fantastic Trench Warfare newsletter, working with the awesome guys over at O-Line Masterminds, even helping out the team and establish the run now. Our guy, Brandon Thorn. Brandon, how we doing?
I'm doing great, guys. Happy to be here on a Wednesday night. I'm on some dad duty here, but my wife's here, so I give Aaron a lot of credit for being here. That's impressive.
It's rough, man. Hey, I'm contractually obligated, and I had some technical difficulties like a couple episodes ago and left Greg hanging, and the guilt that we're at this point, we're like a married couple, so the guilt that he has left me with for missing an episode, I couldn't do it to him again.
Well,
I appreciate it. You know how to work it. You got to be like, no, it's fine. I made it. I made do. It was okay.
Yeah.
So Brandon, before we get in, we shared it like crazy when you first, put it out there to the public, but you had a fantastic episode on your show with Aaron Kromer. And I thought it was outstanding, just being able to go through and kind of spend some time, picking his mind on some of the stuff he talked about his flexibility in coaching and like reaching guys where they're at, finding what they're good at, not being so regimented into there. And a lot of the things that maybe we take for granted, like, no, like they're going to teach them how to do it their way. And like what he talked about was so cool to be able to get that insight. So kudos to you. And what were some of the highlights that you really picked out from having that time with him?
Yeah, I think the overarching theme really that stood out the most was what you just said, and just his ability to adapt and the flexibility there. It sounded like, each season he treated anew, and he would reset the scheme, so to speak, based on the personnel. And I don't know that you get that everywhere. I think there is a little bit more of a rigid kind of mindset with especially coaches who have been around for 20 plus years like him. But his ability at this point in his career, especially, this deep in, I think that's part of the reason why he's so deep in, and he has the track record that he does of all the guys that he's developed and got the most out of. And, I think you really got good insight into that. And I think part of that is the flexibility that he has. But then also, I just love the stories as well. The Carl Nick story was great with when he was with the Saints, and just hearing about the stories of all the guys that he's had his fingerprints on over the last 20 years as kind of an NFL history nerd. That was a lot of fun.
And it's, I don't know if you've ever, Eric Wood has a podcast, and I know there's been a few times where he's had other offensive linemen on and they speak about Aaron Kromer. And like one of them was Mitch Morse. So you have like two centers that played under Kromer at different stops in Buffalo, and just the way they raved about him as a coach sort of matched exactly what you were saying of like, hey, he just kind of let us be us. And then you had I know you've got the shirt on there, which you're
Yeah,
welcome
yeah.
to show the people.
Yeah, I can show you guys.
He also had Dion Dawkins here. You guys got to check the shirt out for those watching live.
That's
Beautiful.
so fantastic.
What a beautiful
Well, not
shirt
only is Brandon wearing that, tell him where you got it.
Yeah, so Dion sent me a little care package. I don't know, maybe 6-7 months ago or so.
Yeah.
So three of these shirts were in there, different styles. This one was my favorite, but haven't gotten a chance to really wear them much. But it's perfect time right now.
Yeah, hey,
absolutely.
we appreciate you breaking it out for us.
Yeah,
but to that point, like it is all different personalities, and I think they talked about, Mitch Morse loves Dion and talking about it, but when he came in, he was a different type of personality from maybe some of the other guys in the room, and I think that they were saying that's kind of one of Aaron Gromer's special ability, not just physically meeting guys where they are and getting them to play to the ability they have, but meeting them where they are as different personalities, and getting that to play as a unit.
Yeah, that's a great point. Dion is a great example of that, and he's had other guys. I think Carl Nix was a big one who, it was very important in terms of who was around him, and he needed a really strong support system coming in, he said, and Cromer was kind of a part of that, and he understood that, and he kind of knew how that he needed to kind of cater to that a little bit and treat him a little bit differently. Treat everybody fair, but not everybody the same, sort of thing. And I think he embodies, that coaching kind of mantra that is easy to understand, but I think it's very difficult to actually execute, when you're in a room with a bunch of different guys.
So let's talk a little bit before we project forward. The last time we had you on here, we were talking about kind of the risk in the changes that we were seeing, letting Mitch Morse walk, converting Connor McGovern from left guard to center, trusting that David Edwards could go from jumbo sixth lineman back into the starting lineup after starting for Cromer out in LA. And, I think Aaron and I were on the anxious side. I certainly, out of all of we call it Black Wednesday, when they let, it was Poyer and Hyde and so many other veterans go, Morse was the one that I was like, wait a minute. Like, why are you letting Mitch go? Like, he's still a starting center. Like, what are you doing? He's going to get a job quickly. And he did. He quickly got a job with Jacksonville. Yep. Where were you from expectations going into last season to then seeing how it actually came together on what that unit turned into?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was, kind of up in the air a little bit, giving the benefit of the doubt to a degree, but I'm trying to recall when my preseason, like going into week 1 offensive line rankings, where I want to say that I had the Bills somewhere like middle of the pack-ish.
If I remember right, I think 13 or 14. I think you had him just above the halfway mark.
Okay. Yeah. So that sounds about right. So I was, cautiously optimistic, I think would probably be a fair way to say it. Anytime you're moving a guy positions and putting a guy in who's coming off of a prior injury, and even with the shared history that they had, him and David Edwards, and the success that they did have, there was just some uncertainty there. And anytime there's uncertainty, you have to go out on a limb if you really want to say you believe in them, or not. And, so I think just based on Cromer's track record and the fact that you had Dion there, Osiris, who I thought was trending up, based on the year prior and whatnot. And then Spencer Brown too, kind of has been trending up as well. I thought, okay, with those three, and then, yeah, maybe he can make it work, with the other two. But honestly, I mean, I think it was a little bit even better than that. And then plus Spencer took another step, and guys took other steps as well. I mean, everybody took a step essentially last year, and I thought it was one of the 5 or so best lines in the league by the time week 18, week 17, 18 rolled around.
And now you talked about like kind of resetting every single year. Now he's going to go into this year with a same 5 intact, and a team that was playing elite. And, a lot of the conversation in Buffalo has been centered around James Cook and what do you do with that run game? And I'll tell you right now, Brandon, when I watch different highlights, and there was Josh Norris put out one of Ray Davis, and they were like, oh, they don't need Cook, they can have Ray Davis. But every Ray Davis highlight was an Aaron Cromer offensive line highlight, in my opinion, made the run game look so much better. And so you're bringing back this really good offensive line. You talked about him maybe resetting. What I want to know from you is, as somebody that's kind of looked into this unit, and I know you like a lot of the guys on this, more from, we know what's good about this unit, but on the weaknesses side, and something that they can work on and build on going into this year, what would you kind of think that they are trying to accomplish this year?
Yeah, I mean, it honestly, I think it's pretty difficult to point out any concerning weaknesses because I believe that this is probably a top 3 unit going into the year. That's probably how I'm going to view them when I do my rankings. So, especially with the continuity now that they have, I expect this to be the best offensive line that Josh Allen has ever played behind.
Love
And,
that.
I would be surprised if that was not the case, barring injury. And now, adding Chase Lundt in the draft from UConn. I mean, Tylen Grable, I still have hopes for. Alec Anderson, we saw what he did last year as a 6 offensive lineman. You still have Cedric Van Pran. And, I mean, you even add Kendrick Green. And it's like you have depth, I think, here, at least with, Lundt, Grable, Anderson, and maybe Van Pran. Like you have maybe 9 guys, and it's going to be tough to cut things down. I mean, your practice squad is probably potentially going to get poached, at some point. And it's just like, I think they're going into the season just very strong. And I, I don't say that lightly either. I
No.
mean, I try not to be that optimistic, especially at this point in the calendar about the team. But, I think you really kind of got to nitpick here. And I think it comes down to, you look at the strengths of the offensive line and the way it's constructed, and you start with the tackles. I think this is one of the 3 or 4 best tackle duos in the league. So you have that as kind of your, the foundation. So then you go on the inside. That's where you could poke the holes, I think, specifically in pass protection, specifically in bad down and distance situations, bad game scripts, down in the game, obvious pass situations, essentially. That's where Osiris can kind of get caught, his feet stuck, especially against wide aligned rushers, things like that. They can set him up a little bit. Edwards to a degree as well. Maybe if Connor gets caught, on a massive, high quality bull rush, from a 1 technique to 0 technique type of thing, like he could get pushed back a little bit. So that's really, I think, the nitpicking that I would go to is just one-on-one obvious pass pro on the interior. But man, I mean, Allen can right a lot of wrongs, and they do a great job of avoiding those situations. So even then, it's not, like I said, much of a concern, but that would be the quote unquote weaknesses that I would probably point out. But yeah, I don't know where else you would go, honestly.
Yeah.
It's a good problem to have. We'll take it.
And
I think
think
you
about
talk
Greg. How many years did we get on post games and be like, well, the offensive line, there wasn't a lot of sacks, but it was Josh Allen being crazy.
Oh.
Now you have the mix of good protection plus, like Brandon said, when it breaks down, then Josh Allen can still get crazy and help him out, but he's not doing all the work for him anymore. Brandon, I used to joke when I was going to say, I used to joke how quarterbacks are always buying offensive lines, all these big gifts and stuff. And a couple years ago when the Bills offensive line was not good, I was like, those guys probably should get together and just buy Josh Allen a gift for making him a little
right.
better.
No, you're not lying.
Thankfully, his ratio of pressures to sacks has stayed pretty consistent. It's just that as the pressures have shrank down, he doesn't have to escape quite as much. So thankfully that hasn't regressed. He's been maintained his ability to escape sacks. They just don't quite make him have to do it quite as often as he used to do. And I think you talked earlier, those weaknesses are very valid. Like those are things that we don't have elite guys across the board. I think maybe we're getting there. Like Dion's always been at that fringe outside the elite tackles. Very, very good. One of the best. Maybe he's had times where he's been the 5th best or the 8th best or things like that. I think Spencer's starting to work his way up in the right tackles and could maybe make a claim for it if he starts to put together a couple of those years in a row. But when you have that balance where now it's not as obvious, we can run the ball at you. You don't know whether Osiris is about to, punch you in the face or whether you're going to have to rush. That's where it really gets there. And it's, I think a lot of Bills fans, we got used to it for a little bit there where it was, this is a Josh Allen offense. So that meant dropping back and passing all the time. It meant dropping back and running was just a necessary evil at points where like, well, we got to keep them honest. And now it got to the point of like, no. If we have genuine balance and we're coming at them and they have to be ready for that, that's how you allow where, David Edwards isn't anybody's superstar, but like when he's your 5th best offensive lineman, you do pretty good. Like that's a good, legit, serviceable starter, and you put yourself in that position. I think that's where that balance comes into play, and that, having that much running doesn't always sound like the fantasy football, excitement, but it really allowed for that offense to let that offensive line thrive.
Yeah, I mean, they're dictating terms to defenses now as an offensive line and as an offense as a whole, whereas before, the prior years, it was really Allen having to bail them out more often than you would probably ideally like. And then, like you said, the run game kind of a necessary evil. I mean, now it just seems to me that at this point in the offseason going into 2025, everything that the Bills have wanted and all the expectations are kind of crescendoing, or how do you say that word? It's coming to a kind of a head, I think, at this point, in their team build. And I think 2025, based on having all 5 starters back, Cook is there, Allen. I mean, these guys are in their primes. Where you had like Josh Palmer to the.
Oh, you went on mute, Brandon.
I think we might have lost your mic for a second.
Yeah.
But being able to put that combination together, and having, that set of guys to be able to go through and, take advantage of that kind of combination is going to be exciting. I think that shows a lot of the potential here. We were talking earlier, you talked about that continuity and being in that position. Even another name you didn't bring up, like I think at Cutdown Day, it's going to be the loser of Tylen Grable, Ryan Vandemark. I think one of those might get moved. I was assuming we needed to extend Connor McGovern and get that taken care of ahead of time. And I'm still open to that. I would still welcome it, to be honest. But I'm now coming around to the idea of like, literally whatever Cromer says is good. Like if he tells me that we can let David Edwards and Connor McGovern walk and Alec Anderson walks in at left guard and Cedric Van Granger takes over at center and Cromer says it's okay, it's self-fulfilling for me now. Like if he tells me like that's what it is for 2026, I'd be like, well, all right, Cromer said that's what we do, so that's what we do. Like it's so funny to make such a switch where that was such a concern for us for so long to now be like, no, we have a guy. Whatever he says is what it's supposed to be, is what it's supposed to be. Oh, I think we're still missing you. Darn it.
Still nothing.
Okay. For some reason,
got it.
We got you back.
The mic on StreamYard went off my mic. I'm not sure.
No worries.
We've had a couple issues. Yeah, I got to write a sternly worded letter to StreamYard with a couple topics.
Yeah, sorry about that. So, but yeah, one of the things that comes to mind as you say that is what Aaron Cromer told me during the podcast with me was he said like one of his main goals is not having to draft offensive linemen high in the draft. That was one of his key points at the beginning of our conversation, I believe, where he was essentially saying, me as an offensive line coach, I have to be able to, extract, value out of guys that are drafted later and or undrafted, because he said, if you have to draft first round offensive linemen all the time, you're just not going to be very good. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that what you're saying, because of the system that Cromer has built, makes a lot of sense. And it's one of the more rare situations to be in as an offense and as a franchise as well, because there's just not a lot of Aaron Cromer level offensive line coaches out there. It's like Jeff Stoutland, Bill Callahan, maybe, one or two others. You can count them on one hand. So when, he's going into his 4th season with the team, I think now. And I mean, every guy there is kind of one of his guys, and, he has a pipeline going now. So I would be totally fine as well if they did decide to move on from guys maybe a little earlier than you would like. And just because he has his guys in there behind him. And, we've seen him work guys in a little bit here and there as well, like Anderson last year, to where it's not a total unknown. And yeah, I mean, I'm totally with you on that.
Well, I think it makes sense that you're allowed to raise that threshold. They're like, all right, if we see that it's a Spencer Brown level player with that elite athleticism who's now merging that with the talent, with the technique, with the consistency to stay on the field, which is what Spencer Friendly put together. Well, those are the guys you extend. If it's, again, replaceable is not the right term. These are all incredibly high level athletes and all incredibly valuable to someone. But if you have a guy like, hey, we don't know that, use Edwards and Alec Anderson, like we don't know that the drop off is that much. Like we think Alec can step in and do a lot of what David is. We wish you all the best. Go get your money. We're going to let Alec step in here and take his shot at it.
Yep.
I think having that guy who, like you said, that pipeline is the right term. Like, we're going to have cut down day issues. Like we're going to have guys that are valuable enough that we know they'll get claimed. And so we can't, like, it'll allow for one of those, we'll get a 5th or a 6th round pick or something like that, because the loser of one of our battles is going to make an NFL roster for sure. It's just picking which one. So I think that idea of getting used to that. And again, in the chat here, there was a question about, I don't know how much you get into contract projections or things like that, but he was asking about what we thought McGovern or Torrence would get on the open market. Do you think out of those interior guys, we'll use the ones coming up here soon with David Edwards, McGovern, or Torrence, do you think Osiris is the guy who could maybe cross that threshold for the Bills and be the one that they retain, or do you see them more equivalent between the three?
I definitely think Torrence is the guy, just based on what they invested in him to bring him to the team in the draft, and pretty significant, and just the way that Cromer talks about him, I think is pretty telling. Just considering his age, just the runway that's still left there, the tread on the tire, so to speak, is just significantly more, I think, than the other two. So. Yeah, just from those perspectives, those standpoints, I think, it's Torrance hands down. And then I think the conversation is like Edwards or McGovern, or, maybe neither, based on Anderson and Van Pran. So, yeah, but I think of those three, Torrance is clearly like the number 3 guy on this line.
Our good friend and Discord member, One Pass member here, Ron Beck, asking, what's Brandon's opinion on Chase Lundt? And then I have a follow-up to Chase Lundt, but let's get your opinion on Chase here first as a new addition to the Bills' offensive line room.
Yeah. Chase Lundt was one of the guys that I liked the most in the draft. So yeah, he was one of my favorite kind of, late day 2, early day 3 sort of targets. And it was predominantly because of how well-versed he was as a run blocker, specifically in the UConn zone heavy scheme, outside, inside zone, a lot of outside zone though, wide zone. Their offensive line coach there, Gordon Samus, I believe, that's how you say his last name. I've talked to him quite a bit, and he's like a big advocate and student of Alex Gibbs, which is kind of the godfather of the zone scheme. So he's a big technician when it comes to teaching zone run blocking. He's had Christian Haynes come out of there, and numerous pros come out of there over the last couple of years, and he has a center coming out next year, I think, undersized guy, but another guy who can get the job done at a pretty high level. Like, they're just very well coached. And then Lundt, I also think, is pretty twitchy and explosive as well. So I think when you pair those two things together, you could have a guy at that point in the draft that could probably turn into a key backup for you / potential starter down the road. I think he has enough physical tools to do that. And then I think from a technique perspective and just an experience perspective, I think he's there, an older prospect for sure. But I think he's already there, in terms of technique. So it's not like you have to,
With his size and measurables, I wasn't expecting run blocking to be the first thing that you brought up. We're talking about a guy like that when he's 6'7" and change.
Yeah, that's, he's a little bit like, his arms are definitely shorter than a typical 6'7" guy would be. He's like under 33, which is fine. But I think his anchor actually and play strength are the things that are, and this is so funny now that I actually say that out loud, because in the Cromer episode, he clearly has a type that he likes to work with. And now he can work with anybody, but he has gotten a lot out of tackles who are a little bit undersized weight-wise, who are not the strongest guys. That's been his MO essentially in his career, of always having one of those sorts of guys. And I just feel like Lundt fits into that because his anchor is a little shaky. He's not super stout and firm against power in the bull rush, but he's crafty. He can steal leverage real quickly. With like a snatch trap technique, which, we know Cromer's fond of teaching that, and guys do that at the highest level for him. So he just fits into the Cromer archetype, I think, of a guy who, a year or two down the line, we could see him in a lineup as a starter as well. And he'll be kind of like a solid level guy like McGovern and Edwards. That's kind of how I see his ceiling.
And just to follow up on that, and this is not in the position room, but the Bills added also Jackson Hawes in the draft here, and he's sort of a tight end, but really coming into block. So with that though, like how much crossover, especially in run game coordination, is Cromer involved with Boras and the tight end room and coordinating that run game and how he wants to see it blocked up, especially when you're bringing in Jackson Hawes, who's specifically going to come in to be more of a blocking tight end?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's essential to the run game. I think he's heading that up and leading the way in that regard in terms of designing the scheme and implementing things and, conveying it to the players and getting everybody on the same page. And I think, you go back to his background. Another thing that we talked about that I found really interesting was he was a tight ends coach. He was a running backs coach, including in the NFL. He coached running backs with the Saints. So
he's McVay's run game coordinator.
Yep. With the Todd Gurley years when he was at his peak. So I think he really relates to running backs in particular very well. Having coached the position, he really emphasizes getting the running back and the offensive line on the same page, in the same room, discussing things, breaking things down, bouncing ideas off of each other, making sure paths match the scheme and vice versa. And then I think tight ends they're just an extension of all of it. Yeah. So tight end, running back, offensive line, I just think he has the expertise to speak the language that they need to hear. He could speak high level, on a high level to all of them. And he does obviously a great job of getting all those guys on the same page as well.
Is there any hope for Dalton Kincaid? Can Cromer get Dalton Kincaid to be a even just mediocre blocker?
Passable.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past him, I honestly, I don't know. I can't really recall seeing Kincaid as a blocker much. So
yeah, you don't want to.
I'm not sure how far away. It sounds like he is far away, but yeah, I mean,
great.
Yeah, so maybe serviceable one day. Who knows?
Oh, that'd be great.
We'll take it. We'll work towards it. Dawson Knox is really good. Jackson Hawes coming in with a head start. So we get two that are right there.
Gilliam's a nice little blocking piece in the run game too. There, yeah.
But I think you touched on it earlier. The things that's super interesting to me, and obviously this show is the Aaron Cromer love fest that I expected it to be. But you look at the variance of the body types, and you talked about like his preference. But like Dion Dawkins isn't anybody's like prototypical build of a left tackle. Spencer Brown is everyone's prototypical build of an offensive tackle. Right. Osiris Torrence next to Spencer Brown couldn't be two more different body types of two guys next to each other in the NFL. Like I had the chance the year I was down there for the Senior Bowl. I interviewed Osiris Torrence down on the field, and like I have pretty big hands, and his hand went like halfway up my forearm, and he was like a walking refrigerator. Like he was just one rectangle block walking along. Yep. And Spencer Brown is just an incredible like angular athlete who can move around, and his footwork catches guys all the time. So like that ability for him to create a cohesive unit that works so well together is really, really intriguing and exciting to be able to see. I joke all the time that, now with adding Jackson Hawes, we're going to be able to have like jumbo set with Alec Anderson in there and Jackson Hawes and Dawson Knox and Reggie Gilliam at fullback and Ray Davis back there. And Josh Allen's going to be able to point at the spot between Osiris Torrence and Spencer Brown. Like, hey guys, we're running there. Best of luck.
Right. Yeah, dude, they're loaded. They're absolutely loaded, specifically from a run game perspective. I just think the weapons at every position, tight end, 6 offensive line, fullback. I mean, it's all there, man. I mean, there's really no weakness.
In some of that, you mentioned the six offensive lineman thing, and here in Buffalo, Sean McDermott gets a lot of kind of guff for at points being a micromanager and stuff. But I think one of the many things that I can point to, besides him letting certain coaches kind of coach their different styles, and we've seen different iterations of offenses and even defenses under him and how they're coached, but having a senior guy like Aaron Kromer with experience come in and just allowing him the flexibility to do exactly what he wants to do shows that he's not so much a micromanager. But one thing the Bills, in my opinion, have been really good at is being really progressive at the head of the NFL and a lot of trends, whether it's the disguised coverages, the too high safety look, some of the stuff they do defensively, but also now you're seeing with Aaron Kromer coming back in, bringing in that 6 offensive linemen and getting a little bit bigger, playing a little more 12 personnel, getting the run game going. You're starting to see a little bit of a revolution offensively away from, hey, let's just spread it out and kind of try to match some of the more college style offenses that people were kind of trying to do the last decade or so. And over the last couple of years, you're seeing a little bit more, all right, well, if defenses are going to get smaller and throw nickels out there, let's bring in an extra offensive lineman and punch them in the face. Do you think that trend is only going to continue? And at what point do you think defenses are going to start to bring in the personnel to match what it is guys like Kromer are trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes perfect sense. I think the league has kind of been trending that way over the last few years where defensive players are getting a little bit smaller. There's an emphasis on speed, quickness, things like that, being multiple, positionless,
Yep.
That sort of thing. So it just makes sense. As we know, the NFL is sort of a cyclical beast, where things just kind of always come back to, the run game being emphasized, bigger bodies on offense, and, to counter what the defenses have become. And I think Kromer's kind of threaded that needle at a very high level. We've always talked about, I think the last few years at least, the theory of having 6 offensive linemen on the field is great. But is it efficient? Does it actually work that often? You probably have to use it sparingly, things like that. I mean, Kromer's just kind of flipped that on its head. I mean, he's made it efficient. He's made it effective. They've done it a lot.
Almost triple the next highest team. It was more than double the next highest team.
Yeah, he is definitely the kind of the teach tape, if you will, of that idea. I think a lot of teams are probably studying the Bills run game right now, or have already this offseason, and they're going to try to replicate some of it. And another thing that Kromer did is, he started pulling the tackles because he doesn't believe the guards are good pullers. So, or not as good as the tackles.
You have the different.
He knows how his tackles are.
He knows his tackles are premier sort of pullers. So let's focus on that. Let's have them do that more than the guards. Yep. So I think it's an evolving process, and that's the beauty of it. That's the luxury that you guys have, is it's going to keep evolving based on who you have. But now that we know that all 5 are returning, it's probably going to look similar to last year. There's going to be some wrinkles, I'm sure, but it's probably going to be a lot of tackle trap, tackle pull. I would imagine that's still going to be a piece. They're probably going to get into it from different looks, though. The formation diversity is probably going to be really fun to watch, because that's another thing, is making the same run concepts look different. And that's a McVay kind of specialty. That's Kromer, as well. That's
100 different ways to run duo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, and I think that a lot of it, like you talk about, that evolution is his flexibility. It's also making use of the personnel. So the previous year, it was him knowing he had a starting caliber guy in David Edwards. So we want to use him as a jumbo offensive lineman. Yeah. Then Edwards moves into the offensive line. They may have leaned into just extra tight ends, but he's like, well, Alec Anderson's really good too. Like, he's that caliber. Like, he's that kind of guy that can play there. Now you see whether their planning is, sure, maybe that's Chase Lundt, maybe that's keeping Connor McGovern and Cedric Van Pram Granger becomes that guy. But also, if it doesn't, we draft Jackson Hawes. And now if we let McGovern and Edwards walk, Anderson and Van Pram Granger move into the starting lineup, we still have good depth, but we don't have like, hey, this is a 6th starting caliber guy. Well, fine, let's pivot back and just use Jackson Hawes as a blocking tight end, and we lean back the other way. You're being flexible to get your best guys on the field at all times. In that, we had Dawson Knox, but we didn't really have another blocking tight end. Like, Quentin Morris was kind of a backup of a Dalton Kincaid, not a hand in the dirt traditional tight end in that sense. So
Gabe Davis was probably the best blocking.
Matt Collins and
lineman
Gabe Davis were basically played back, tight end 2 in a lot of sets.
Yeah. You don't want to back yourself into a corner. You want to have a lot of things on the play sheet that you can go to. And that 6 offensive line piece and or having just a high quality 6 blocker, having that still is, I think, an important part of what they want to do.
And because of how long it takes trends to change, I mean, I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but I think the Bills probably have a little bit of an advantage getting out ahead of that trend for a couple years before defenses are really able to get the personnel back to sort of offset what a guy like Cromer is trying to do in that run game, right? Like, because defenses are still drafting a ton of these hybrid linebacker safety.
They're not bringing Brandon Spikes back in at inside linebacker.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's what makes like a Landon Roberts and guys like that stand out. Guys who are coming downhill. There's not a lot of those guys, at linebacker, off-ball linebacker, that is. So yeah, I truly do have a lot of trust in the select few offensive line coaches in the league that are at the elite level, like Cromer, to adapt based on personnel, based on what the defense is giving him. He can run any scheme, and do it from a bunch of different looks. So if defenses do a better job of adjusting, which I wouldn't be surprised that they do, I would expect some sort of wrinkle, to maximize his guys. And he still has really good guys to lean on too. So it's not just all coaching. I mean, there's really high quality players up front too, on the offensive line. So it's, like I said, man, it's a really good blend of elite coaching with really good personnel on the offensive line. And I don't see that changing regardless of what defenses do in 2025.
Is Cromer
from your mouth to the NFL field?
I'm just being honest. Yeah.
Is he at the point now? Like, I know he's had bounced around, had different jobs, coordinated. He's probably more in the Scarnecchia part of his career where he is one of the best offensive line coaches, and he's just, if he's got a good team with a Josh Allen, just gonna ride this type of success out. And at what is he, almost 60, age 58? Like,
he'll be 59 later this year.
Probably go another decade doing exactly what it is that he's doing.
Does Terry keep cutting those checks?
In interviewing him, like, it seemed like he still, that passion, that fire is burning as hot as it ever has. Like, it doesn't seem like this guy's at the end of his coaching career here.
Yeah, like you said, he's been a coordinator. He was even a head coach for, a chunk of the season with the Saints. So he's had kind of a taste of those things. And I mean, maybe a coordinator again. I don't think that would shock me, but I mean, if I was betting, I would probably lean on just this, this position he's in right now: run game coordinator, offensive line coach, has a pipeline going. And just, he's with one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
I was just going to say, getting to create your schemes or behind one of the best quarterbacks in the league is a great way to continue to look great.
Jeremy can just tell Joe Brady goes off to get his head coaching job. Like, Aaron Cromer's staying. Like, you don't get you can big whatever else for a wide receiver coach, but
that's going to be interesting, right? That's going to always be, that's one of those interesting things. Like, I'm sure Ben Johnson wanted Hank Fraley, but the Lions said, no, that's our guy, and Fraley's kind of on the cusp of kind of getting into those conversations as well. So it's anytime you have an offensive line coach that is that valuable, you try to hang on to him. You try, there's no salary cap
just keep
for that.
Throwing money at him.
Just keep doing
big
that.
old checks.
Yeah, exactly. There's no way I would let him go. So, yeah.
Well, Brandon, you've been more than generous with your time here. Let the folks know, what do you have coming up next on the newsletter? Any upcoming more interviews? What do you got coming on your content?
Yeah, so not confirmed yet, but I do have plans for another offensive line coach in the NFL interview.
Nice.
I did do Bobby Johnson with the Commanders, had him on. That was great. He was awesome as well. Got to talk
we had
about
Bobby here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We touched on his time in Buffalo a little bit as well. But we had him. He's another guy born in Ohio, went to Miami of Ohio, just like Coach Cromer too, which is kind of funny. But yeah, the next coach, don't want to give it away yet because it's not confirmed, but it's going to be an exciting guest. So that's in the works. But aside from that, I'm going to be doing my top 75 offensive linemen that I've done for the last 4 years for my Substack. That's a big undertaking for me that I really enjoy doing. So that's coming up as well. And then I'll have my top 32 offensive lines for Establish the Run in the next few weeks.
Very, very cool. We appreciate it, man. You're always great. Always one of our favorites. We'll continue to bug you again to bring you back on. I know Eric always says the same, and we can praise you highly enough. You're our go-to guy. We appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks for coming out, Brandon.
And obviously we mean it, what we say. Like as soon as a guy is drafted, as soon as we sign a guy, when we're looking at things, like my very first stop is like, wait, what did Brandon think about him? Like that's my go-to thing. So when you hear things like that for Chase Lundt, and I know that Steve Mathis and our like day 3 guy, I cover one, the guy who knows all the crazy later ones. He was a huge Chase Lundt guy. So knowing that Brandon is a fan of his, like, I won't, like, I'm being dead serious. Like, I now take that more seriously. Like, oh, maybe that is a pick in the 6th round that might have a little bit more value than normal. Maybe he is a guy who we should count as more of a roster spot, someone I'll take more seriously. Because again, when Brandon signs off on a guy, and he was early on the Spencer Brown train, he was he saw what the potential was. I think a lot of people saw the flashes, but were concerned about the consistency. Now having that guy, he was a guy who was ahead of the curve on that. Like, no, if this guy stays on the field, you're talking about one of the best right tackles in the league, and he took that leap. So it's someone that I take his opinions on offensive linemen carry as much weight as anybody for me.
Yeah, he's one of the few content creators, in my opinion. Like, there is a lot of noise out in the social media world now, and a lot of
like Cody with defense.
Yeah, exactly. Go to where if with all the defenders, that's who I want to see what Cody has to say, or just defensive schemes. And there's just a lot of noise and a lot of experts or people claiming to be experts. And that's the thing, is like Brandon never really like claimed, like he's not a guy that's like, hey, my word is gold. I'm just going to tell you what I think, and then the work sort of backs itself
and
up.
Everyone else tells you that they respect his. When you see like Duke Manyweather, like, it brings him in to help do the O-line masterminds camp with all the offensive linemen, and you see, like, but I don't know if anybody noticed, but like behind Brandon in his office, you have like signed jerseys with messages from, I think it was Taron Armstead and Quentin Nelson, and like some of the best offensive linemen in the NFL writing him handwritten notes on their signed jerseys about some of the work that he's done. Like, Brandon's as good as it gets. It's
absolutely. And it speaks for itself. And I think we are so connected on social media sometimes that people don't realize it, but players are on there and they see stuff. Even Eric, like players are reaching out. Why do you think Film Room's able to get Bills players to come on? Because
we've had 9 so far this offseason.
Yeah, he knows the things he's talking about, and they want to have those conversations with guys like Brandon, like Eric, and so it's cool. It's a cool era we live in here, where a guy like Brandon can make a name for himself and get access to the NFL like he's getting, and the type of content he's creating. So really appreciative of him taking time out here to talk to a couple bozos like us on a Wednesday.
For anyone who hasn't seen it yet, when we do our post-show production, we'll put the link to his interview with Aaron Cromer in our post-show notes here. We'll have producer Chris add that in there. That'll be great for anybody who hasn't seen it yet.
Yes, sir.
We have one final fun announcement here. I know anybody who wasn't looking here, our What's Brewing, as you see behind us, is going to be a new segment that's going to be here with us the rest of this offseason and through the season. And I shared on social media, like, this is a really important one to me. Southern Tier Brewing Company was started in Lakewood, New York, in the Southern Tier, where I'm born and raised. Like, I was born 7 miles from where Southern Tier Brewing Company was created. All of my family still lives there. Some of them go out to the brewery and visit it on regular occasions. I even joked with Aaron, like, it genuinely is my favorite drink. Like, anybody who sees me answering my questions on a random Saturday night, it's because I'm drinking Southern Tier. Like, this is the most genuine sponsorship I've ever had since we've been doing this. Like, I already love their product. I already love their company. It's from where I'm from. I couldn't be prouder that we are now going to be sponsored by Southern Tier Brewing Company, and hopefully the first of many seasons to come.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this one. Prior to my life as doing this and the other ventures that I ventured into, I worked at Kegworks over on Military. Anybody here local knows that. And I was a homebrew instructor and super into the local beer scene, and big fan of Southern Tier from everything that they've done there. And they were always part of that scene as well. So it's very cool sort of to come full circle now. And I was actually down at their location. I went camping down at Panama Rocks, which is down your neck of the woods down there. And we went out to dinner at Southern Tier this fall. Fantastic dinner, great place to go grab a meal. Also super kid friendly. The kids were all just running around with a bunch of other kids out there. It's a really nice facility. And I grabbed a 6-pack to bring back to camp with me. So I'm hoping now that they're a sponsor, I can go down there. We are going to go back to Panama Rocks here this fall. So I'm hoping I can go down there and get a little bit more beer than I did.
Do we get like
time.
a card? Do I get like hey, you sponsor my content card?
I'm going to go up to some random waitress and be like, hey, I'm Aaron from Cover One Buffalo.
Yeah.
And they're going to be like,
I don't know if you recognize me, but I'm Greg. Like I need like a special Southern Tier Brewing Company card that gets me a discount.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate it very much. We're really excited. You guys will see us going through, and this will be, some of that breaking news, new updates that come along for everything. We'll do something each week here, but what's brewing here tonight is the announcement of the maybe a live show. Their place in Buffalo. It's gonna be fantastic. I absolutely can't wait.
Yes, sir. Yeah, super excited about this. Looking forward to it. And yeah, we've got a great group of sponsors here going into the year. Great job by you, Greg,
for this season. Yeah, it's this came together well. Obviously, still working with our guys over William Matar Law Offices. You guys know the slogan, hurt in a car, call William Matar, 844-444-4444. We're going to be setting up and rolling again with our guys over at West Her, doing our drive of the game in the post-game show. So everything coming together nice. We're excited to bring you guys another fantastic season. And we got a couple more weeks coming up here. As you guys have seen, we have leaned in a little bit differently here. Traditionally, Aaron and I have done a lot of the position preview shows and things like that on our own, and we thought we wanted to bring in some different experts to be able to bring you guys a little
actual
bit
experts, not just us.
Yeah, people who actually know what they're talking about. We thought would be an interesting twist for you guys to have those kind of people around here. So obviously, we've had some Bills coverage guys coming in previously. We had Reed Ferguson on for the specialist. Tonight was Brandon. We've got a really nice lineup coming up here. Joe Marino is going to be joining us next week for defensive ends. Then we'll have Matt Harmon on for wide receivers. If anybody doesn't know, does the reception perception and one of those go-to guys for wide receivers. Same idea. We talked about Cody Alexander. His content is fantastic. He could do any of the defensive positions, but he's going to help us out with linebacker. We'll have Carl Jones on for cornerbacks and Bruce Nolan on for safety. So a really nice run of guests coming up here to be able to help us finish out these position previews, get you ready for the season, get you ready for training camp. And like I always say,
I was going to say, then it'll be turkey burger season by the time we're done.
We'll be talking about all those. I want to see how many Dion Walker can eat. We'll get a count going on.
I'm sure somebody will ask.
But as these go, this is about as evergreen as any of Aaron and I's content goes. A lot of it is very, time specific. But if you have people in your life that are looking to get caught up, they're getting excited about the team, they want to know what's going on, you can bang through these ones really quickly, get an understanding of what's going on at each position group, be able to talk to your family, your friends at the water cooler. You want to just know more about the team. This is a great way to get yourself caught up. Yeah, you could, some people have to deal with an Uncle Drew in North Tonawanda. It's that kind of thing that you have to go and deal with. You want to know what you're talking about. Come and listen to these shows. Get yourself caught up. You can bang them right out right before training camp and be ready to go and be informed amongst the people talking about the team.
Yep.
Anything else for the people before we close out?
I got to go to bed. My kids actually made it.
You and me both.
They must have fallen asleep.
That's just good father.
You know what? I'm not a terrible dad after all. All those haters on the internet.
Kudos to you. You brought like a gaggle of boys home from school and had everything set up, slip and slides, pools, water balloons, water guns. You had a really cool setup. That's top-notch dad work right there.
You know what, man? That stuff's easy because there's nothing cooler than being a kid in the summer. And I want to make sure those core memories are real blasted in there because it's the best. And real life's terrible. So my kids and the rest of their lives
we're dealing with as adults is pretty horrible. So whatever you can do to let them focus on remaining a kid. Good job. Good job.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, we appreciate it very, very much. Shout out to all of the folks over here at Cover One making this possible. Big shout out to our guy, Brandon Thorn, joining us here tonight. But on behalf of our fantastic producer, Chris Kepner, my co-host and partner, crime, Aaron Quinn, I'm Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.